So thank you everyone for joining us tonight for this webinar. I'm just going to introduce to you Professor Murray Drummond, and we've also got on the line Dr. Ivanka Pritchard and also Hayley Truskowicz. I hope I pronounced that right. Did I get it right?
Yeah, that's good.
Close enough, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the wonderful team who completed this study for Netball SA. They're from SHAPE with Flinders University.
See I can't. I can see them. They can't.
I'm just going to mute Sue there for a moment. So they are the wonderful team that has done this study for us, and this has been 2.5, 3 years in the making now, I think, Hayley, which is a huge milestone for us to have this report. I know a number of you are aware of this study that we've undertaken. It pretty much stemmed from the anecdotal feedback that we were getting from a lot of our membership saying that football in particular, or those non-traditional offerings for girls, were impacting participation numbers across netball. And so we thought it was really important to quantify that and really understand that. So the wonderful team at SHAPE have done a great job of this. And I am going to hand straight over to Murray so that he can take you through his presentation.
Great, thanks, Megan. Yes, can I also just congratulate Ivanka as well, because she's a freshly minted associate professor as of today. So that's a congratulations to her. So she's moved from doctor to associate professor, which is great. So well done, Ivanka. The other thing too is this was a piece of research that was done. Obviously, Netball SA came to us to work out how we could potentially do it. And then we were also able to go back to Flinders University and get an innovative partnership seed grant as well. So virtually matched the money that was available from Netball SA. So this isn't sort of like a dinky piece of research. This is actually a really robust piece of research where we've been able to get a lot of data. We've been able to really get the depth and breadth that we need, both quantitatively and qualitatively as well. And we've got a significant team of I think 5 or 6 of us that have really worked on this for a long time. So without further ado, I'll get going. Okay, so there's this is what the report will ultimately, or does ultimately look like if you ever get your hands on it. That's the start of the report there. So what were the outcomes of the research designed to do? Well, firstly, they were to influence the future design and marketing of Netball SA programs to better engage the target markets for netball. They were to enable advice and targeted support for affiliated clubs and associations to better market netball to their local community. They were to provide evidence to seek better collaboration across female sport providers to work together to grow female participation across all sports rather than compete for the attention of current sport participants, as well as to identify the need to review netball formats to meet the needs of the societal changes in sport engagement. And there's some really key things that we'll be bringing up in relation to that around the societal changes, because they are extremely important. So we did take a novel approach because this is the first mixed methods study in South Australia to investigate the factors that contribute to the phenomenon that we've coined shuffling in female sport, so a shuffling of the deck chairs as such. So we're really concerned about looking at the way in which female sport, not just netball, but the way in which women's sport is being framed in terms of girls moving from one sport to another. And so we're also looking at basically the participation rates for girls as well. Because if we are just having girls move from one sport to another, that becomes problematic. But we can talk about that a little bit later on as well. Girls and young women moving from one sport to another, specifically netball, to AFLW and other contemporary sports, is a key part of this research. And this research was designed to provide Netball SA with the evidence to better understand the current landscape of female sports participation in South Australia and enable the development of strategies to ensure netball can continue to be viewed as a sport of choice for all. So what do we do? We had several phases to this research. In phase one, we used a quantitative research design with an online questionnaire to explore sport participation and commitment to netball. Now, Ivanka is going to speak to that in more detail in a moment, but I'll just go on to what we did in phase two. Phase two consisted of qualitative focus groups and interviews to explore themes that arose from phase one. So phase one led on to phase two. And again, we'll get Hayley to come and talk to you about how we actually went about collecting the data and attaining the participants for within this. And clearly, like all good research, ethical approval for the study was obtained from Flinders, the Social and Behavioural Research Ethics Committee. So that's absolutely imperative. Okay, so the sample. What did that look like? The qualitative and quantitative participant base of the study was sourced from the netball community in South Australia, utilising Netball SA to assist with recruitment. The participants included players, coaches, club members, umpires, and parents. So we looked at the players as obviously as key to this, but then we call, I guess what we call the coaches, club members, umpires, and parents as key stakeholders. So they become very important for us to get a really good understanding of what's going on, not just for the players themselves, but from a whole club perspective, which is absolutely critical, clearly in pre-COVID times, but it's now even probably more important post-COVID times. And that's one thing to remember as well, is this data was collected pre-COVID. So whatever we say here, that needs to be taken within that context. But that's notwithstanding that that the data that we've collected is very relevant and is clearly relevant in today post-COVID as well, even more so. So many participants had been involved in multiple roles throughout their netball careers. For example, club members identified as players, and at some point coached or were on committees. So you know, there's a lot of people that have been players. They've been on committees, they've coached, they're parents, they've had the whole gamut. And so they have a really good understanding of what's going on in clubland, within their own netball club and within the broader context of netball across South Australia, which is absolutely important. Hayley, do you want to talk to the recruitment and how we went about doing that?
Yeah, just click me through as I hit each point. So from phase one, from the survey, we basically stepped into the qualitative phase. So we used this sort of referral idea to recruit participants for the interviews. Go to the next one.
Yeah.
So we basically advertised on the Flinders University website, and we tapped into Netball SA's networks there and sent out emails via the email database and also social network feeds such as Facebook. Also got in contact with some clubs and regional competitions to sort of increase that engagement. Also was often situated at Priceline Stadium, just creating awareness of the study and recruiting people from that face to face. So notably at the Country Champs competition and various nights through the AMND competition as well. So sometimes that eventuated to later interviews or sort of live on the spot interviews where we had a space that we could use. And that was a really good form to actually talk to players, particularly younger players who are there with their parents and, you know, waiting between games. And then, yeah, as I mentioned, from stage one, the questionnaire, participants were able to indicate if they wanted to be involved in an interview. So sporadically, and it's sort of, yeah, very sporadically as people finished the questionnaire, I'd get an email if someone wanted to actually be involved in an interview as well. So then it was just a matter of teeing up a time from there.
Yeah, and if I can just jump in too, Hayley, I mean,
Sure.
if any of you have been involved in any research lately, it's incredibly hard to get people to get involved in research. I think there's so much research going on that I feel like a lot of people actually feel like there's some sort of research fatigue. And Hayley was like a dog at a bone in terms of trying to get these people to actually be involved in the research, and she did it very well, and she did it very nicely, but she was able to get, you know, well over 400 participants for this, and you know, had iPads at the ready and so forth for people to do it there and then on the spot, which was wonderful. So we were able to collect a really good, robust amount of data for Ivanka and her team to really, you know, work on, which was great. So Ivanka, do you want to speak to the methods of the quantitative phase?
Sure, thanks, Murray. So in relation to the first phase of this project, as Murray has mentioned, we conducted a questionnaire survey. So this is a cross-sectional kind of snapshot of, to gain an understanding at a single point in time. To participate in this survey and the study more broadly, participants had to be over the age of 12 and female and currently playing netball or have played netball within the last 12 months. In line with our ethical guidelines, informed consent was gained from all participants, and then parental consent was also gained for those that were under the age of 18. And in relation to what people were asked in the survey, we had a series of questions on participant characteristics, things like age and the area in which they lived. We had questions on sporting involvement and asked participants to respond in relation to up to 3 main sports, with netball being the main sport of interest for us there. There were a series of questions related to social norms in sport participation, which we felt were important because a range of different societal beliefs might influence how someone chooses to partake in different sports. And then we also had a validated scale of commitment to sport, the sports commitment questionnaire, that was used to and asked participants to respond, particularly in relation to netball, to understand that a little bit more. This next slide just talks about the analysis process, so I won't bore you with that too much, but basically we used the one of the most recent editions of SPSS, which is the statistical package that we use for all of these analyses. Within the report, we describe all of the quantitative data with means and percentages where relevant, and then have used inferential statistics to establish whether there are any significant differences in between groups. And in particular, as you'll come to see when I talk about the quantitative data later, we looked at participants that were aged 12 to 17, and then those that were aged 18 and over in terms of their responses. I think I'll hand over to Hayley and she'll talk you through the qualitative data collection phase.
Yep, off you go, Hayley.
Thank you. So when we got to the interview stage, we basically were exploring the experiences that participants had within netball, and that included a range of participants. So we not only focused on players, we also looked at coaches and umpires and parents. So we looked at really the whole ecosystem of participation in netball. So again, as Ivanka alluded to in the quantitative stage, in the qualitative stage, we also interviewed participants of, I think 13 was the youngest age, and that was often at the carnivals and stuff at games. And all the way up, I think we had a few women in their 60s that had just lived and breathed netball their whole life. So I had a lot of key insights to share there. So most of these interviews were in fact one-on-one, but a few of those were in a group, and that was usually with the younger participants. And interestingly, actually I'll move on to that in a second. But yeah, so we did target regional and country areas. So we got participants from the Eyre Peninsula, Riverland, Fleurieu Peninsula, and then just sort of more regional country areas surrounding metropolitan Adelaide, and then also within metropolitan Adelaide as well. And I think just that emphasis that we were trying to explore was really that the cross-code participation. We're really trying to understand why participants might become involved in another sport, be it football or be it another sport, and what are the things that are keeping these participants in netball and maybe showing signs of interest in another sport. So what are those things that are drawing them into another domain of participation? And again, that was not just from a player's perspective, but also from parents, coaches, managers, umpires. And what we also noticed is a lot of people were involved in a lot of different roles at different stages in their life. So there was a very holistic sort of understanding there. So next part, we came to analysing the data. We use a deductive thematic analysis. I won't go into, again, the analysis too much, but between two of the three researchers, we collaborated and defined some of the themes a bit more cohesively. And we came up with these themes, which is what we're going to talk about a lot today. So key themes really being a cross-coder, so looking at the experiences, team size and resources, so that between different sports and different teams, and looking at that how that influences that experience, governance, and the opportunities that are available or that are perceived to be available for different participants. So we'll unpack those as we continue on. So yeah, over to you, Murray.
All right, so Ivanka, you've got the next 8 or so slides, so you can go into your quant stuff and then we'll get into the qual stuff.
Thank you. So just a brief description about the sample that we ended up with. For the analysis that was conducted here, we had 482 participants, and as I mentioned before, they either needed to be currently playing netball or had played in the last 12 months to be included in analysis. Originally, we had lots of interest in the survey link, over 800 people clicking onto the survey, but we needed to remove a number of those from analyses. Either they were under the age of 18 and we didn't have consent for them, they were under the minimum age, or the majority of those had clicked onto the survey, responded, but then not actually given us any information about their main sport, which we needed to then progress with the analyses. So about the 482 that were included, they ranged in age from 12 to 70, so quite a broad range there. And roughly half were in that adolescent age range, so 12 to 17, and the other half were 18 years and over. Then if we move on, thanks Murray, the 93% reported netball as their most played sport. So you remember before I mentioned that they were asked to indicate the top 3 sports that they played. And so 93% had netball in there, but the remaining 7 still had netball in their top 3 sports. We also collected some other demographic information in terms of the level that they played netball at, with the majority, so close to 90% having played club netball there. Thanks, Murray.
Yep.
So we might just move into some of the reasons why people liked playing netball. And the main reason that you can see through there are the socialising and health and fitness came up as main reasons for liking. For some, the competition aspect was really important and skill improvement. We looked at differences between the main reasons that people like netball among the adolescents and the adults. And you can see that those in the 18 plus age category did play netball for health and fitness reasons to a much greater degree. And for the younger cohorts, so for the adolescents, they played significantly more for the enjoyment of it and for skill improvement. We do need to touch on some of the dislikes as well, and they're important to consider in terms of what people like and don't like about playing netball. The main things that emerged here were the politics in relation to netball, so negative social interactions that they might have, umpires and rules, and the weather as main categories there, with injury playing a role as well.
Well, I also must say, in the full report, there's the actual numbers are there, the full quantitative, data sets there. But I just thought I'd put it in just as a graph for you tonight.
Thanks, Murray. And I'm happy to give percentages to people if they would like them as well. So we also looked at differences between the adults and adolescents in terms of what they disliked most about netball, and interestingly, the adults liked or disliked weather significantly more, so were much more influenced by the environment around them as far as weather goes. But in terms of other environmental aspects, coaches and parents or spectators were aspects that the younger participants, so our adolescents, were much more concerned about than adults. And thank you. So I mentioned before that we also looked at sport commitment, and this established scale has a range of different subscales within it. And so a little bit busy here, but what you can see are a few differences and a few similarities across our adults were enthusiastically committed to netball, and perhaps enjoyed sport overall a little bit more, and also lower down in that particular figure seemed to touch on that social support that they might gain from engaging in netball. But many of these aspects were relatively high on the scale, and so most of the participants in this particular cohort were still quite committed to netball, which I think is great to hear. And then this next slide covers off and looks at some of the social norms in relation to participating in not only netball, but also in some other main sports that are available for girls and women to play in. So as far as this scale was concerned, we were interested in how easy someone would find it to play a particular sport, how many of their close friends, so how normative it was for their close circle to play, and whether their close friends thought that they should play. And then what they saw as being popular in the media, and then what they believed their parents thought they should do. I think the interesting things to pull out here is that obviously netball scores the highest in terms of percentages on each of these factors, but that the media is certainly playing a role in terms of the popularity and how cool AFLW might be. And in terms of how easy a particular sport might be to play, those that have skills in netball have relatively transferable skills over into basketball in terms of what they believe there as well. And they're probably the main things to pull out there.
Yep, they're good.
We did look at differences then between the adolescents and the adults in terms of all of these different types of social norms. And I'm just double checking whether any of those are significant or not, but there are a few that are interesting to look at. Obviously, parental support and whether a parent thinks someone should play a particular sport is not as important for those that are 18 plus as it is for our adolescents. So targeting parents' views are important for maintaining young people in sport. The media seems to still play an important role across both age groups, as does what their friends and social networks do, as well as how easy they find it to play that particular sport.
So essentially, this is good data for netball. Yeah, so it's good.
Yep.
All right, moving on to the qualitative component, which I can talk to. So within this, as Hayley said, there was a number of different themes that emerged. One of the biggest themes that did emerge was this notion of being a cross-coder or a code hopper. And now you're going to hear those words a little bit over the next 10 or 15 minutes, because this is it appears to be really important for netball, and it's also very important for young women and young female athletes, particularly as the sporting landscape is changing quite significantly for girls and young women around a whole range of different sports and expectations in those sports. So as I've said here, there's a range of sports available to girls and young women, more so than ever before. And as I said before, in terms of that, that social landscape, this has changed. Certainly, it's been changing in the past, 15 years or so, but it has changed significantly, probably in the past 5 or 6 years, and that's due to some of the clearly the inroads that the AFLW has made. Also, I'll call it soccer, but world football, and those sorts of things. So it's just made it far more accessible for girls to feel like that they can be involved in a whole range of different sports. However, it is AFLW that's captured the hearts and minds of many, and in fact, that's almost a quote from one of the girls, which will come a bit later on. It's cool, it's sexy, it's exciting, it's something new, and it's something that's been quite prohibitive. And we know when things are prohibitive, they always do seem cooler. And now it's opened up. So we need to be mindful of that with respect to netball. For a lot of young girls and young women, they've been surrounded by it in terms of their dads and brothers are likely to have played it. Their male peers are most likely involved in it or have been involved in it. But importantly, what they're doing now is they're seeing a pathway, and that's absolutely critical. So they're seeing this pathway for girls and women to professionalism for another sport. Whereas netball was often the sport for girls and young women to move through a pathway. There's something else now, and we're also seeing that with cricket. We're also seeing that with basketball. But as I said, the AFLW seems to be the one that's capturing the attention. So, being a cross-coder, this is what one of the participants had to say. I'd always loved playing. I used to kick the ball with my dad when I was younger, but never really had the opportunity to play it as a proper sport. And then as soon as the opportunity came when I was in school, I wanted to have a go. So they're the types of things that are being said by the majority of girls that were interviewed. Another one said, just the fact that we've got an older brother and dad, and we've got older cousins, and they've always been football based. I grew up watching footy, kicking the footy with my brother. And so now I can play footy. Whereas previously I played when I was under 11s and under 12s, when I could play mixed with the boys. Once I got to 13, I couldn't play anymore due to organisation rules. And so I stopped and I only played netball. Up until then, I did both. And then I had to stop and I only played netball. So these are things that that netball now needs to be mindful of. Whereas the girls were playing up until 11 and 12, and then they had to stop, and they ended up playing netball because that was available to them. Well, now there's something else available to them. So that's really, really important. So those code hoppers may continue down that path. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, again, is something that we need to discuss, and they can be discussed in the recommendations. But there's certainly a significant amount of passion with AFLW, and that's coming through. So it was a huge thing. Like, I loved it, you know. This is it. This is it for women. Like, this is the first time we've ever had a team. This is the first grand final we've ever won. This is it. Yeah, it was exciting, definitely exciting. It's like, I've always wanted to give footy a shot, and now it's happening. So it's like this dream come true for a lot of young girls with respect to football. Another girl said, I will always love netball, and I may go back to netball in the future. But right now, footy has just literally won my heart, and I just want to get better at it and see if it can go anywhere. Now, this is one of the crucial things here. I will always love netball, and I may go back to netball. So that's a really crucial thing here. The girls who play netball clearly love netball, and they love being involved in netball. So that's sort of that's undeniable, and that the quantitative data showed that. But these girls just want to give something else a go. They just want to try something else. So how do we go about doing that? How do we allow these girls to go and try something and yet open our arms for them to come back? And this is really critical for netball and for other sports as well. And we can talk about that in a moment as well. So a word of caution for netball. It would be good if netball coaches went out to a footy training. This is what one participant said. I think that they would probably get a bit of a shock at like how serious it's taken. It would be good for them because then they would think like, oh, what can we bring to netball that's going to make it a little bit more like that? So what these young girls are saying and young women are saying is they're saying, there's something really cool about football. We really love netball, but what can netball get from AFLW and from football that they could bring back? What could we do that's going to make it exciting? Well, clearly there's synergies, but then there's clearly not a lot of synergies as well. So netball will need to be mindful of this and will need to be smart in terms of understanding these girls and what their motivations are and how they can bring some of that back, what they've just had, back to netball. Noteworthy, and this is an important point, that the injuries in AFLW is certainly a concern and can play a role in terms of either keeping the netball girls involved or bringing them back as well. So again, be mindful of those sorts of things. So injuries are just crazy in footy, as one girl said, and the toll on your body. I mean, in footy, you go so hard and you're absolutely stuffed at the end of the day, and then your body is probably going to ache all day Monday. The toll it takes on your body is crazy different compared to netball. Okay, so that's an important point. That's what another young girl said. My parents said that if I want to play footy, I can't play at a high level. If I was to play footy, it'd definitely just be for fun because they don't want me getting concussion. So there's certain understandings that are associated with AFLW, that concussions are going to happen, that injuries are going to occur. We've seen a significant amount of ACLs being done in AFLW as well. So where does netball, end up picking up the pieces kind of thing? There has to be this opening for netball to get some of these girls back. If they don't feel like they can play AFLW anymore, because a lot of girls do come over. I spoke anecdotally to a number of young girls playing, and they didn't realize how tough and how hard AFLW can be on the body. And a lot of them are getting injured, but then they don't feel like there's a pathway back into netball because they've been away from it for 12 months. And so that's a real pivot point right there. So we need to be understanding of that. How do we get girls that have actually gone to AFLW, and then how are we welcoming them back? That's really important. Theme number 2. So that was the first theme. Now this is theme number 2. So we've called it, sort of tongue-in-cheek kind of thing. Size does matter. So AFLW have larger squads. Therefore, there are more opportunities for girls to play in senior teams and engage in a team environment. So that's what a lot of the young girls were saying, or a lot of the younger women were saying as well. So it was this big, sprawling, exciting, environment where there are a whole bunch of, young women all engaged in the same goal. So, you might have, 22 for a team, but there'd be a squad of 30. So you've got this whole range of different people coming into it. This is what one of the girls said. I mean, there's nothing that can beat, like, honestly catching the ball on the run from a tap and kicking the goal. But there's no better feeling in a game that I've played yet. Kicking a goal from, a distance and like the winning goal or something like that's just incredible. I mean, I've had games where it's like really close with netball and everything, but it's different. Everyone gets around you. Everyone's hyped up in football. So again, it's just that it's that difference in terms of excitement and so forth. And I guess largely because it's new, it's so new for these young girls and women. Another one said, everyone's involved. Everyone loves footy, everyone. There's so many people involved because you've got the trainers, you've got the managers, you've got everyone, and it's not just the players. So that was a big one. Like with netball, it's just the coach and it's just the players. With football, you've got like 10 other people on the sideline. Conversely, someone said, or a couple of people sort of said, alluded to, that's the kind of the advantage netball's got. That is, you can play, as I said before, at different levels. Like in every age group, there's 5 or 6 different levels you can play at, whereas you may not have that opportunity in football. There might only be 1 or 2 grades, and you're playing, and you've got 30 to 20 kids on a team, or 25 kids on a team, and you've got massive differences in ages and abilities. So playing amongst that group is hard. Whereas netball, you can kind of cater to their abilities. So again, this is something that within netball needs to be promoted. So AFL, while AFLW is shiny and new, it's exciting and all of those sorts of things, netball needs to be continually promoted to say, well, we are catering for various abilities. We've got these different grades. We've got smaller teams, and we can cater for your needs and so forth. So that needs to be promoted, and often, because often it's the parents who are making these decisions for their kids early on in their life on what sort of sports they're going to play. So if they feel that they're going to be, if they're going to be catered for and they're going to be looked after in this smaller, nurturing environment, that's a good thing from a parent's perspective. Okay, so that's really important. Theme number 3. So the board sport versus appeal kind of thing. So the appeal of netball occasionally wavers for some of the participants as girls seek to try new sports as a consequence of many new sports that are on offer. So there's an argument that continually occurs throughout the narrative and throughout the data, is that netball is potentially not changing with the female demographic. And that is that there may have been a level of complacency that's been developed. At the administrative level, at the Netball SA level, but also at the local level. We've been doing these things the same year after year after year, and it's always worked. But now there's a couple of new players on the scene. Maybe we need to do things differently. Maybe we need to think about how we do these sorts of things. As a person said, or as a participant said, it's not that these sports are pulling players or girls away from netball. It's that netball isn't riding the wave, but they need to. They're resting back and saying, oh, it's netball. Everyone loves netball. All the girls play netball. No, they don't, and they won't if it's not in their face. So these are really critical points that need to be understood. And how does netball, how does a team, how does the netball organisation itself become this rejigged, remodified new version of itself? And it's going to take some doing. It's certainly happening at the national and international level, where there's some new rules involved, and there's trying to be, new faster versions of netball and so forth, which are, some of the old guard are saying maybe it's not the right thing, but the younger girls are saying this is great. This is what we want. This generation of young people, it was like the argument with with T20 cricket. Oh, that'll never catch on. Music and fireworks and all of those sorts of things. Well, look where it is now. And that's exactly what young people want, and that's what families want. And they want to go to something that they can take their young kids to and watch and get home to bed at a reasonable time. So these sorts of things need to be considered as well. You can see here I'm a bit passionate about that. Okay, issues with resources is also really important. And it was raised often often by participants, both the players and parents and key stakeholders as well. Lack of talented umpires was a key thing that was emerging. The difficulty in navigating and finding information on Netball SA sites and individual sites as well. A lack of coaching clinics for juniors. And while they said that, a lot of people said that while these online coaching courses are great, and I'll admit they are good, I'm heavily involved in surf lifesaving, and I do like all of these online coaching courses. Nothing beats actually the physicality of it and actually being involved and face to face as well. But I understand the logistics of that. In this post-COVID world, clearly things change as well. But we need to be able to have a mixture of both, because I get it that people are busy and that the online clinics are great, but we need to be able to have those hands-on skills as well. And maybe that can occur after major tournaments or those sorts of things, at Priceline Stadium or something, where you might stay back an hour or so, where parents and coaches can stay back an hour and a half, just to upskill a little bit more. So just got to think a little bit laterally, that's all. So theme 4, what we've termed the undesirable pathways. So clearly pathways through netball were varied and often compounded by a diverse range of factors. So pathways through to the elite levels of competition were identified as limited and highly competitive. I mean, which is great, but these are also the things that can put people off. So this was mainly a function of the limited spots that are available on representative teams, resulting in a bottleneck of the selection process. So again, young people felt like there were potential opportunities elsewhere because there were so limited opportunities to make it to certain levels within netball. So one person said, yeah, netball with the high levels is very hard to break. I mean, you look at every age group in a state, there's 10 or 11 girls that can get into a state squad. And there's only one super netball team here in Adelaide. And it's very hard in that most are full of imports. So where do the girls go with netball as far as getting into those top teams? Another person said, I suppose when you look at the netball numbers and it's very hard to get to the pointy end of being up the top. So if you think you're middle of the range, well, I might be able to have more success in a bit more obscure sport or something different where I can stand out a little bit more. And this is where the new contemporary sports, and I'm not going to just keep harping back to AFLW, but a lot of other sports as well. So if girls, if girls want to reach a pinnacle of something, of some sort of sport, and they want to go down a netball pathway, and they see that it's just all too hard, there's now far more opportunities for girls just to simply jump off that pathway and move to something else. And we're still at that point where there's a lot of girls who are able to do that. So they're able to jump off a pathway and jump to something else because there are less numbers within those sports. AFLW, even cricket, even soccer in Australia or world football. There's still the ability for girls and young women to code hop and find their niche. It may not be like that in 10 years or so. As like, for example, with AFLW, you've got the girls now doing, like the NAB Auskick and all of those sorts of things. And so their skills will become heightened from an early age. So the opportunity to jump from netball or another soccer or wherever to AFLW may also be, very, very difficult. But at the moment, it's not that difficult. So there is a point that, we need to be aware of. All right. I know I'm also mindful of the time. We've got about 12 minutes or so. Recommendations. what I've done here is I've used a bit of a preamble to the recommendations to allow us to understand the recommendations that are coming. So for example here, netball is an important community sport with a rich social and cultural history in South Australia. It sits neatly as a major participatory sport for girls and young women in particular. So the first recommendation, to continue nurturing the sport as a major pathway for girls and young women through traditional and non-traditional means, including community organisations, schools, football and cricket affiliations, and online promotions. Also, to invest in, I've got to move this because I can't read it, there we go. To invest in targeted media and social awareness campaigns that outline netball as a contemporary sport that will provide significant physical, mental, social and cultural benefits to individuals in the community. Note, this is even more relevant in post-COVID-19 era. All right. Okay. So there are many challenges that exist for netball in South Australia with respect to participant numbers. These challenges relate to competing contemporary sports such as AFLW, women's rugby union, women's football or soccer, and the potential for cross-coders or code hoppers or code hopping participants. Okay, so number 3, governing netball bodies, state, regional, metro and local clubs need to continually seek out research data and understand the changing sporting landscape for women in South Australia through continual research analysis of participation data. Note, invest in strategic partnerships with tertiary sector research industry to conduct regular 5-year research data collection by Netball SA, Office for Rec Sport and Racing. So basically what we're saying is that what we've done now, let's not leave it 20 years. Let's do it again in 5 years. And this should be on a rolling basis because the landscape is changing significantly. And what Netball SA has done, I think they should be applauded because no one likes to hear criticism. And they could have just stuck their head in the sand and said, yeah, we're doing well. But they've gone out to find out what's going on. What can we do better? And these are the sorts of things that need to occur and on a regular basis. So number 4, invest in promoting, educating and training clubs at all levels in being flexible and adaptable in catering for cross-coders and code hoppers. These participants are likely to be the future of women's sport in South Australia and need to be nurtured to remain in netball regardless of their commitment. So we have to basically say, if you want to go to another sport, try it. That's great. But, you know, come back to us. Come back to us at some point. Or if there's a girl that wants to train, like for example, if a netball club or a netball program wants these girls to train 4 or 5 times a week, and they're saying, look, I'd really love to give AFLW a go. I'd really love to give soccer a go. But, I've got to train a couple of times a week for that. Why can't we say to these girls, okay, go on Tuesday and Thursday night and train with AFLW or soccer or wherever you want to play, but come back to us on those other nights. So be flexible, be open, and be open to a range of different trainings because the young people now are different to what they were for a lot of us, who I'm in my 50s, to what we were back then when we were kids. We need to promote the successful cross-coders and code hoppers to the broader community in order to highlight the unique skill set that netball has to offer its young female participants, make these athletes visible and emphasize the role of netball in their success. If there's someone who miraculously becomes a great AFLW player and hits the media and they were a great netballer, let them know. Identify that netball was the thing that provided them with these skills. It gave them the opportunity to be a good athlete, to develop work ethics, to understand team culture, all of those sorts of things. Embrace it. They're really important. Offer the successful cross-coders and code hoppers a pathway back to the sport through mentoring, coaching, and administration, thereby emphasising netball's adaptability. If they've gone elsewhere and they've had a good career elsewhere, but they've been a good netballer and they understand coaching and administration, bring them back. If they've got a name, bring them back. That's really important. You know, I guarantee that basketball will be bringing back, or if they can, Erin Phillips with open arms down the track, because she has a name. She's got this, you know, she's got this cultural or social capital with young people, regardless of the sport. Establish a culture of information and resource sharing with a range of sporting codes to support the development and aspirational goals and cross-code athletes. Really, really important. Okay, getting towards the last few. The governance of netball in terms of its participation rates is crucial for the longevity of the sport. Being agile and adapting to the changing social and cultural financial landscape will be essential in the immediate and long-term future. So number 8, establish a state-based committee to provide oversight of netball retention and re-engagement in the sport. They're the types of things that are absolutely critical, and they can sit, you know, aside from Netball SA, and they can almost be an independent body to provide sort of an independent kind of understanding of this. Invest in the development of an easy to understand set of guidelines for grassroots clubs to adopt regarding engagement, retention, and re-engagement of athletes. We know the great work that clubs are doing at the grassroots level, but a lot of clubs are run by mums and dads. A lot of these mums and dads don't have administrative skills. They may not have the long-term engagement and involvement in netball or in sport at all, but they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart because their kids are involved. So we need to provide almost like these go-to set of guidelines, 10-point plans that allow them to understand these sorts of things. And interestingly, we're trying to get some money from the Australian Research Council to do these sorts of things with them, because we absolutely think this is critical, because we know the great work that you know, mums and dads and volunteers absolutely do at the grassroots level. Number 10, design, implement and evaluate a revised participatory framework that prioritises player retention and return. This includes using evidence-based knowledge to maximise sampling, i.e. entry-level experiences, and support transition through grades and pathways. So it's basically what we've been saying all the way along. Get people involved, keep them involved. If they happen to move away, how do we get them back in whatever capacity? Don't lose them to the sport. It's really, really important. All right, I think we're getting towards the last ones. The traditional, historical and cultural significance of netball in the community for girls is diminishing with the advent of increased numbers of contemporary sports and recreational activities on offer. Similarly, through gender equity campaigns, traditional masculinized sports have opened up as an option for girls and young women, some with legitimate career or elite sporting pathways. As such, the position of netball is no longer a taken for granted pathway for girls' sport. So we need to invest in a sustained awareness campaign across multiple media platforms, including TV, print, and social media, to promote the physical, social, cultural, and mental health significance of netball as a recreation, competitive, elite sporting pathway with multiple endpoints that will cater for many people's needs, including boys. Now, we haven't really touched on boys. We haven't touched on boys at all within this. Clearly, it remains a largely female-oriented sport, but there's opportunities to include boys as well within the context of gender equity, and you know, it can be a significant area of growth for netball as well. Okay, the age at which girls begin to abstain from sport in general begins to occur in early adolescence. However, girls are also noted to drop out at 17 to 18 years of age. many of whom are completing year 12. There is often a tendency for this dropout to be legitimised by the schools and broader society. As a result of the argument based on focusing on educational outcomes for future employment, while the focus upon education is clearly important, there is potential for girls during year 12 to drop out of sports such as netball and not re-engage with the sport or any sport at any level for some time. This has implications for netball participation rates and a loss of social and cultural capital within the sport. So I do a lot of work. I've done a lot of work and research over the last 25 years on boys in sport. And in comparison with girls, there seems to be this underlying notion that it's okay for girls to drop out of sport at year 12 because they're focusing on education. There doesn't seem to be that level of urgency for boys to drop out of sport at year 12 because that's what boys do. Boys play sport. It's a rite of passage. Boys are meant to play sport because it's a part of who they are and it's a part of their masculine makeup kind of thing. And as a result of that, boys don't drop out of sport as much at that 17 to 18 years of age group because there isn't as much of a gap. But what we do find, and we've found with not only this data, but we've done a significant piece of research for the Office of Rec and Sport and Racing recently, which we'll be starting to promote soon. But the year 12 dropout for girls is significant. And 1 year of dropping out, it offers that potential for a lack of re-engagement for a significant number of years. And if you drop out of netball for a year, you might not get these girls back until later on when they want to just have a social event in their mid to late 20s. So you've missed 5 or 6 years of these girls playing netball. These are absolutely critical points that need to be understood, and how we deal with them is going to be an issue. So the last 2 points. Invest in a sustained Girls in Netball campaign across multiple media platforms, including television, print and social media, once again, to promote the physical, social, cultural and mental health significance of netball in the lives of girls and young women throughout the school years, including year 12. So that's the point of difference here. So promoting it specifically around this period. Work with clubs and coaches to recognise the need to adapt training and allow for girls to have negotiated amounts of time away from training during specific times throughout the year 12, for exams, tests, assignments, those sorts of things. This might involve the athletes working with the coaches and fitness and conditioning staff, maintaining match fitness and undertaking skill sessions at home on a periodic basis. There are now many opportunities with online portals such as Zoom and Microsoft Teams, etc. So we need to become far more adaptable with that. We need also for coaches of teams at the grassroots level, at pathways levels, at state level and even national level to be in liaise with the girls at year 12 and their teachers, and if they have high performance people at their schools, which certainly a lot of independent schools have now as well. So that's really important. I think I'm done. I'm done with talking. If there's any questions, myself or Ivanka or Hayley can answer your questions, but that's about it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Murray and Hayley and Ivanka. That was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing the research and the findings with us and the recommendations. Is there anyone on the call who's got any questions that they want to ask while we've got these guys with us, just to make the most of the opportunity? Nothing at this stage? Nope, that's all good. That's totally fine. Look, we'll leave it there. If anyone does think of anything afterwards, and once they've had a full read of the report and they've got questions, please feel free to reach out. And if it's something that I'm unable to answer, I'll reach out to the guys at Flinders Uni and we'll get an answer. So I just again want to thank Murray, Hayley and Ivanka for the time that they've dedicated to this project. And also thank you to all of our netball community members who jumped on tonight for the webinar. We really appreciate you doing that. It shows your commitment to our sport, and also to understanding women's participation and girls' participation in netball and other codes as well. So thank you, everyone. And I think we'll call it a night there.